Welcome, adventurers, Episode 3, Epic Sci-Fi Outpost. It's going to start today with this insert from an Instapot. I was at a birthday recently and was inspired by its shape. It's got a lot of interesting detail to it. We're going to start by cutting off some of that interesting detail, because we don't need it for this. I'll save that for later. Maybe we'll use it for something else. Oddly enough, by the time we're done, you won't be able to see most of this anyway. A few finishing nips and tucks here to get rid of the various pointy edges that I don't want. And now we have a base for our base, which unfortunately has no structural integrity. So we're going to cut some XPS foam into small blocks that fit inside, 5 of them to be exact, using some Gorilla adhesive construction glue that I learned from Eric's Hobby Workshop. We're going to glue these in place. And while they dry, we're going to start working on the decking for our epic base here. I found that 10 5/8 was about the right size for this, and so we're going to cut this 12 by 12 inch square down to 10 5/8 by 10 5/8. Once we do that, we're going to save the offcuts because we'll use them later to further embellish this decking material. Now that we have a square, let's make it a stop sign, because there's no such things as 90-degree or 45-degree corners for some reason in any of sci-fi. Because that's the rule, I guess, somewhere. We're going to take some screen repair screen that I got from Lowe's. I think $7 got me a 14-foot roll that will last me the rest of my natural life. Here I'm taping it down so that I can trim off a little bit of it to make it fit this octagon, and using super glue and baking soda, I'm going to adhere it into place. This is wonderful stuff. If you see any that sticks out from under whatever covering material you have, it can be rust or dirt that's compiled or that's built up on the surface. So now I've got it fully glued down. I'm going to clean up my mess a little bit and make a bigger one. So while I'm cleaning that up, I want to remind you to like the video. You should also subscribe. And if you like my mistakes, hit the notification so that way you can see them more sooner. Now back to the show. Here we're going to use scissors and a sharp hobby knife here, or in this case box cutter, to trim off the excess. And those offcuts from earlier, we're going to trim down into 3/4 inch widths to make some straight railing edges, as well as invert those triangles and attach those that we cut off earlier, and fill the gaps with smaller triangles, just like you see here. More super glue and baking soda to both adhere the screen down a little better and add more interesting detail, in this case dirt and rust, that you'll see us paint up better later in the show. And once that's done, and being sure not to glue your fingers to the project, make sure you dump off your excess baking soda and save it for later. Now we're going to use an excessive amount of hot glue on this base and glue our decking to it, obscuring most of the awesome detail that I got this thing for in the first place. Just like that. Now this base needs some walls, some short ones here made out of 1/2 inch XPS. They're kind of roughly 4.5 inches. Bevel some so that they can fit nicely together. And begin battle damaging them with an ink pen, an X-Acto blade, and tweezers for blast marks. Ultimately, I think it looks pretty good. Do whatever you'd like here. There's no real pattern. Now, Mod Podge is absolutely correct. I should have used it here first. I didn't. A mistake I will live to regret. But the plaster makes great concrete texture, even though it does nothing to protect the foam. Speaking of foam, we're going to use some EVA here to cover this Pringles can, what looks like metal. Using a high-tech method here, I determine how much I need, trim it down to size, and begin texturing it to look like plates of metal bolted together. If you missed it in episode 1, go watch it now and come back. We'll still be here. A knife for ridge marks and an ink pen for rivets. Now, using an appropriate amount of super glue, unlike in episode 1, we're going to make sure that this thing sticks solid. A little bit to first, a little accelerant here in a second to make sure it stays firm. And then we're going to put some heavy beads after I make sure the length is right, both horizontally and vertically on this length of foam. Fortunately, EVA doesn't react to super glue or construction adhesive or hot glue, as best I can tell. The only thing it really reacts to is extreme heat, and you have to try to do that. Just remember to not set off your smoke detector when you do it like I did. Now we need some sort of platform on top of this tower. So with another piece of chipboard, we're going to cut off the corners at 1 inch by 1 inch to create little 22.5-degree corners, because it's sci-fi and that's what you do. Just like this. Super simple. Hot glued into place. Now we need to make walls for our catwalk up here, our crow's nest, as it were, with black foam core. I'm going to cut off 1 inch widths. Length was determined by the piece that I had, and glue them into place with hot glue. I realize we need a ladder, and I'm going to show you the exact wrong way to do it. Because if you don't use parchment paper, you end up gluing your ladder to the surface you're working on. It's one of many things I forgot today, and this is the outcome. So let's move on to doing it the right way with parchment glue or taped down, and you can see better what I'm doing anyway. Using the lines on my cutting mat, I'm going to cut rungs for this ladder. There'll be about 10 of them, I believe, and we're going to glue them in place. This is thin super glue, so it absorbs into the wood as well as coating it. So once it's all down, we're going to use a little accelerant, test to make sure everything is stuck firm, and pick up our ladder that doesn't fall apart now. Using gel super glue, we're going to adhere it to our watchtower, and we're going to add some embellishment to that. I wanted it to really look reinforced, so I'm going to cut 3mm widths of EVA foam that I'm going to wrap around the actual crow's nest section to not only hide the seams, but also make it look like it's extra super duper tough. You know, because the thicker it is, the tougher it is, right? This is almost perfect the length. I also make vertical supports to go in between them at each corner to add for the reinforcements. Here I'm going to cut some thin cardstock in order to make caps for the railing to not only hide the seams, but also give it a much better finished look, just like that. A pin for rivets, and the watchtower is done. A generous dose of hot glue, because that's the construction adhesive of choice for the, sci-fi future, to make my watchtower attached to the base. Now we need blast shields. Unlike before when we used 1/2 inch foam, we're going to use 1 inch foam here and make 3.5 inch wide by 6 inch tall buttressed columns to protect the warriors that reside within this fortress, this outpost, this lone defensive barrier between the great evil forces that want to destroy your world and you. Now I'm going to do the first one by hand here. I'm going to come in 1/4 inch from each side, and I'm going to bevel them. I'm going to do this with a knife to show you that you don't need special tools in order to accomplish these things. It's not hard if you're patient and you take your time. I make guidelines, make sure they look good, line up to see where I want to cut, and with 1, 2, 3 slow cuts, I have a beveled edge. Trim off any weird excess. Again, 1, 2, 3 shallow cuts, and then a 1, 2, and 3 more shallow cuts, and now I have a beveled buttress wall. Trim off the weird cuts because it's hard to do it exactly right. Now here I'm going to use that first one I made as a template to set up my procs on, because I have one and I would rather use it because it's faster and definitely makes more consistent cuts in what you're working on. It goes through quick and makes the exact same cut every time. I continue this process with the small buttresses that go on the blast walls, hot glue them into place, and just like that, we have 4 reinforced buttress blast walls. Now let's destroy them. What fortress doesn't have battle damage? You cut off a chunk here, you gouge it there, shoot it across the room apparently. The big chunks we'll save for later because we'll use them for extra detail. With a pen we make bullet holes, with a hot glue gun we make deep plasma burns, with sharp blade we cut gouges into this concrete, and just like that we have battle damaged walls, cracks and all. The hard part is figuring out which side to put them on. Since there's a front, a back, and two sides, one would assume that the more damaged ones would be in the front. So that's where I decided to put the most damaged one. And once everything is figured out, I should say, where I want it, I hot glue it in place, and that part is complete. Now, how do your soldiers access the base? Well, they need a ramp. Now, to make sure that this ramp doesn't collapse under the weight of particularly heavy models if you put them on there, we're going to reinforce it with a few coffee stirrers. Figure out where we want to put it, make sure the links are good, super glue them in place, and then attach a actual popsicle stick there so it's wider so that it has something to adhere to. Accelerant to make sure it stays, and then a test fit where I determine that the coffee stirrers are too long and trim them down a bit. This allows it to actually get good purchase on there and have more surface area and a smoother transition to glue to. But, as you can see, it's a slide, not a ramp, so let's give it a little texture. Just like that with matchsticks. Now, the little toy soldiers won't be sliding all over the place when you run them up the ramp. Test fit again, looks good, hot glue, and we have a ramp for our soldiers. Now we got to make sure they can, or rather that the base is good for this. And we do this by trimming it very close on another piece of black foam core. Sharp knife allows us to go all the way around, and a bevel with an X-Acto blade. Here we go. We don't want it taking too much room on the table, so we try to make it very close. With a pencil, we're going to mark where the edges of this are, put hot glue there, and on the support columns underneath, we're going to put it there so that we have many layers of connection when it comes to the hot glue. Getting it pressed down so that it all sits nice and flush while the glue cools, and now you have a base for your base. That's on a base. Let's trim a few more pieces of this off-cut concrete to add detail and make some more chunks of concrete. If you wanted these to look more like rocks, you would roll a ball of aluminum foil across them, or actual stones to give them more of a stone-like texture. Here I wanted it to imply that it was leftover concrete from construction and or repairs. Once you've trimmed it down to where you want it, hot glue it in place. Again, Mod Podge is right. I should have used it. But I get a great concrete texture out of this, even though it does 0 to protect the foam from accelerants and spray paint, which you will see later. We're going to go some basing now, since I can do that without screwing it up. We take Eileen's tacky glue, roughly 1 parts that to 3 parts water, and thin it down. We're going to use that to adhere our sand to the base. Now, I got tube sand from the hardware store because I needed it. I put it in the truck for weight in the wintertime. But I sifted some of it out and got a bag full of sand and another bag full of larger aggregate. So we sprinkle the sand onto the Eileen's tacky glue that's watered down, and we continue this. I work in sections, so I don't try to have too much wet glue all over the base at any one time. And using that same watered down glue, I'm going to put droppers of it all over the sand to ensure that it's fully secured to the base. Nothing like having grit all over your dining room table when you're playing a game. Using unwatered down Eileen's tacky glue, we're going to put little piles of glue, and we're going to put the larger aggregate there to make it look like larger bits of debris that is broken off from our walls. And we're going to continue that everywhere we think we need it. Once that's done, again with the watered down Eileen's, we're going to put it on each one of those piles to hold them in place and give it ample time to dry. And once it's dried, we're going to take it outside and prime it with a spray can of gray. Now you can't see the damage here because my cameraman really sucks at his job. He missed the part where I base coated the golden brown along all the sand and dirt at the bottom. So, good job, cameraman. He's fired. He also missed the part where I taped out everything so I can put black paint on what's metal and not get it on the concrete. Like that. Now we're going to take some medium gray, and everything that is still gray, we're going to paint with that so that it actually looks like concrete. I know, exciting. Gray on gray. With a little bit of vanilla, we're going to dry brush the sand and debris that's around the base of our base. I say base a lot in this video. That's weird. Using light gray, I'm going to dry brush the concrete parts, the buttressed walls and the smaller walls inside the fortress. This allows it to actually bring out all the nitty-gritty detail that we put in there by gouging it with pins and whatnot, as you can see here. It's looking pretty good. It's going to look much better here in a little bit. Now let's move on to dry brushing the metal. This is worn. Soldiers have come in and out of this base many times, obviously using the ramp most of the time. So a little bit of dry brushing on the ramp to really bring out that detail of worn metal. Any place you think needs extra detail, edges, places people are likely to move, that ladder, for instance, the inside of the crow's nest, exposed edges on these triangles. Those are the places that you should focus your dry brushing, because those are the ones that are likely to get worn the most. Now here, all that baking soda and super glue we put in for extra dirt and debris is going to come to life. We're going to make it what we want it. Dirt. We're going to stain it with a little bit of reddish brown wash to make the rust that's been accumulated in here and as well as the dirt come to life. Man, I should learn how to talk before I make videos. Here we're going to use the black wash I've used before on the piles of larger aggregate first, because I'm going to come back through after I stain all of them and stain them again, as well as all of the dirt, to make it really stand out. I wanted the larger aggregate to look darker because it's accumulated dirt and debris more. It's bigger, it's got more surface area. Now here I've taken it outside and rattle canned it with a clear varnish, and the accelerant went right through the paint and the plaster on there to dissolve the foam. I should have listened to you, Mod Podge. I should have listened. I'll know better next time, and I'm sorry. So, now that we've learned this valuable lesson, we're going to continue with our weathering. In this case, more of the black wash, because the clear varnish will help it run better and go into the recesses and look a lot cooler. I also go back around from the bottom up after I've washed everything to make it look like grime and debris is really built up around the bases of these buttressed walls. Now we need rust. This is an oil wash. It's a reddish brown that I mix myself. It's roughly 2 parts odorless mineral spirits and 1 part red, orange, and brown. Mix it till you think it looks right, basically. I'm going to put it everywhere I think rust should accumulate. Vertical surfaces, people where they put their hands, where 2 metal plates meet like this. Don't forget the runs. And at the edges here where the soldiers actually stand. Now that that's complete, let's take a look at that finished product. There it is. Looks like Tiny and her comrades have taken over this fortress. I wonder who they're fighting. I wonder if they'll win. Yeah, who am I kidding? Tiny's in this fight. Guaranteed to win. And with a fort like that, nobody's going to take it from him. I can't wait to see the end of this battle. Well, thank you for watching. Now go have an adventure in crafting.